You may have heard of the philosophy class where the professor was going to give his final exam, and the students had prepared all the different philosophies, Plato, Aristotle, throughout the ages. And the students received the exam, and it was just one 8x11 piece of paper, and there was just one word on it, one question. And the question was, why? Students were a bit nervous about the grade that they were going to receive. They stood or sat in their seats, not knowing what to write, until one student, about 30 seconds in, hands the paper back to the professor. The other students are a bit baffled that this student really finished the exam so quickly. And the professor looks at the answer, and of course, the student writes, "Why not?" and gets an A in the exam. I'm not here to give a philosophy exam, but our Parsha I like to call a Mitzvah exam. Because if I ask you why we do certain mitzvot in the Torah, you'll give me lots of reasons. Why do we give tzedakah? You can give me a multitude of reasons. Why do we observe Shabbat? Why are we welcoming the stranger? Why do we not steal? Why do we not kill? Why do we not lie? All pretty rational reasons. Until we get to our Parsha this morning, where we have a chok, a statute, a law called Para Aduma, meaning the law of the red heifer, the red cow. Now, when you think about this strange ritual and I ask you why, maybe you'll say, why not? And the rabbis answer why in 3 words. God says so. Now, if you think that's perhaps a reason that's not so applicable, you're right, because hundreds of years of rabbinic explanations explain why God said so. And they don't come up with a reason. So let's talk about the ritual first and how that works, because that's even stranger than the reason that are given. The ritual is that if somebody is impure because they've been in contact with a corpse, a dead body, then in order for them to become pure, somebody who is pure, a kohen, a priest, takes the ashes of a red cow, a red heifer, with water, sprinkles it on the impure person, and the magic has been done. The impure person is pure, but guess what? The person doing the purification is now impure. Pure, impure, pure, impure. The cycle never stops. And if you think that you're the first person to grapple with this of the reason why, let's take King Solomon in Ecclesiastes, the book of Kohelet. He says, I thought I was wise, but this eludes me. And then if you look at Sefer HaChinuch, meaning the book of education, it's the book that looks at the mitzvot of the Torah, and it gives reasons for each one. The author says this. He says, I wrote this book of mitzvot so my children can be educated. But for this one, Rafu Yadai, my hands have been weakened. He says, I'm afraid to say anything about it. And so his reason of why God says so is that it is an esoteric mitzvah, meaning I don't know, but only God does. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, a 20th century Talmudist, explains that it's not necessary that it's an irrational mitzvah, but rather we have so much trouble about it because it is a paradox. That pure people become impure and impure people become pure. It's like a pinball game. And that is why it challenges our minds. I just started reading the book this week by A.J. Jacobs called The Puzzler. And he does a deep dive into why we love puzzles, or perhaps why we hate puzzles. But he says we love puzzles because even though it's hard work, at the end of the day, there's a solution. If you try to solve a crossword puzzle, you can look up the guide, or you can find the answers yourself. And so who cares? This mitzvah is not even relevant today. There are no red heifers. We don't practice this mitzvah. So why am I spending 10 minutes speaking about this? Because if you look at the illogical reasons, as Rabbi Kamenetsky says, this paradox, there is in fact a lesson for humanity, but also for us as Jews. The great author Mitch Albom, who celebrates 25 years of his great book, Tuesdays with Morrie, which many more books have come out, of course, the most recent, Strangers in a Lifeboat. And he has a podcast accompanying this 25th anniversary called Tuesday People. And it's just 20 or 30 minutes or so about the meaning of life. And this week, he spoke about something called the tension of opposites, the pulling of one sentiment against the other. And after listening to what he was saying, I know he wasn't really speaking about the Para Aduma and pure and impure people in the case of the Torah and the Bible, but he was. He says that people live in polar opposites, that we live with purity, we live with impurity, but the real idea of the tension of opposites is to how to comfortably live in between, how to not only accept the gray area, but embrace the gray area, understanding that we have desires, that we have reality, and that how do we find that sweet spot in between? That neither direction should pull us one way or the other. And this law of Para Aduma, this chok, this statute that God said so, that's the lesson. To understand that we in fact may not understand. To understand that there are things that are beyond our comprehension. The tension of opposites, the middle ground. To not be intimidated by that tension and not to walk away and say it's not this and it's not this, so it's nothing, but rather, if it's not this or if it's not this, maybe it's the in-between. That student in the philosophy class, when he answered why, perhaps he was also a student in the yeshiva. Because we know that the answer to a Jewish question, and my father's a rabbi, and he would always tell me the best question is another question, and it would frustrate me probably even to this day. But I admit he's right. Because a Jewish question is always answered with a Jewish question. The Jewish answer is living in the gray. In fact, the Jewish answer is being okay that we are not okay. Every Shabbat we can stand here and list impurities in this world. Only this week, there's never a mishaberach that's empty. The list is always full. The list is always full of people in need. There's more anti-Semitic acts happening each and every day in this country. In fact, just over these past few weeks, right outside our doorways, we had pamphlets dropped on our driveways explaining how the root of the cause of the problems in this world are the Jewish problem. People attending a July 4th parade in Highland Park, Illinois, don't come home to their children, to their grandchildren, trying to celebrate freedom. There's not enough time to list the litanies of impurities in this world. Rabbi Gideon Rothstein explains that this chok, this law of Para Aduma, is there because we know that throughout this tension of opposites, there can be moments of purification. That it is always available to us, and that our tradition wants to find a way out of that tension. And so, with each week of impurity, we can also find a list of purities. Let's just take this week again. This moment, Matisse's bat mitzvah, uniting a family across the ocean from the UK to the United States, because Matisse stood up here and said these brachot of an aliyah was the water to the generations that will come. The past 6 weeks, I've stood under a chuppah, a wedding canopy, different couples, of course. Each and every week, souls finding love, creating the future of the people. Every day in these halls, hundreds of children running around, leading a sacred life of Torah, of Judaism. And each one of us, whatever week it is, one week we might feel the most impure week in our lives, the other week the purest. But we gather within the tension of opposites. We gather here because we know that if we had that week of impurities, we know the person on the other side of the room is ready to perform that ritual, to give us purity. And we know that the person who is already pure is ready and willing to reach out to the other. So the next time that you have that philosophy exam, or let's call it the mitzvah exam, because the mitzvah exam would not be answered by why not. The mitzvah exam would be answered by another word. How? How? How will I take the unanswerables in this world? How will we live with the tensions? Because the uncomfortable is the place that moves us to make a difference. Somebody told me this week in an interview that a comfort zone is beautiful, but with no place to grow. A comfort zone is beautiful, but has no place to grow. And so, yes, our rabbis frustrate us word after word in the Talmud, but they're right. We too must make meaning out of complexity, out of the tension of opposites, out of the discomfort that will allow us to chart a bright path forward. And so, as a human being, it's true. We cannot comprehend the incomprehensible. But as a Jew, we can see the different parts of our world that we cannot comprehend, incorporate that chaos into our lives, carry our impurities in the week ahead that will allow us to be just a bit pure tomorrow. Shabbat Shalom. We continue on page 204. Cantor leads us, En Kelohenu, page 204.